The camera slowly zooms in on a frail-looking woman with perfectly combed gray hair and hands that tremble slightly. Margaret Wilson, 75, sits upright in the studio armchair, her face a mask of serenity that hides decades of secrets. The studio light reflects off her glasses while the audience remains in sepulchral silence. On the other side, a middle-aged man named Jason Miller, 42, can't look at her. His face is a mixture of conflicting emotions, anger, confusion, pain, and a curiosity he can't hide. Beside him is his newly discovered fraternal twin sister, Sarah Wilson Thompson, 42, a woman who until 3 months ago was a complete stranger to him. Sarah's eyes are swollen from crying, but she holds her chin high, determined to confront the woman who altered the course of her life before she even learned to walk. Seated in the front row of the audience are Sarah's adoptive parents, the Thompsons, a couple in their 70s, dressed simply but with dignity. Murdoch Thompson holds his wife's hand tightly, as if he fears she might disappear if he lets go. Next to them are Jason's parents, the Millers, a couple who seem to have aged 10 years in the months since the discovery. Mrs. Miller holds a handkerchief she occasionally uses to wipe away the tears that won't stop falling. Their faces are marked by decades of unanswered questions, now replaced by answers they never wanted to hear. "We are here today to talk about something that goes beyond the comprehension of most people," says Alex Rodriguez, the renowned host of the show Hidden Truths, walking across the stage with measured steps, his eyes never leaving Margaret. There is a tension in his shoulders that frequent viewers of his show recognize. It's the kind of posture he assumes when he's about to confront an injustice that personally revolts him, a decision that forever altered not just one, but dozens of lives, a decision made not by God, not by fate, but by a single person. The camera cuts to Margaret, who takes a deep breath as she clutches the worn leather bag in her lap. Her fingers, marked by age spots and arthritis, seem to want to pierce the material. Such is the force with which she grips it. Mrs. Wilson worked as head nurse at Springfield Memorial Hospital for over 30 years. Respected, admired, a professional to whom families confided their greatest joys and their deepest sorrows. Alex pauses dramatically, until a DNA test revealed a secret she had kept for decades. The images shift to black and white photos of Memorial Hospital in the 1980s, showing old Carters, nurseries with rows of newborns in identical little cribs, separated only by nameplates. The camera lingers on a young Margaret in her impeccable white uniform, her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect bun under her nurse's cap. In every photo, she smiles, alongside exhausted but radiant mothers, cradling newborn babies, guiding nervous parents on how to hold their children for the first time. Always smiling, always present in the most important moments of families' lives. What nobody knew, Alex continues, as the background music increases in intensity, creating an atmosphere of suspense that makes the audience lean forward in their seats, is that while Margaret was cradling those babies, while she was comforting those mothers, while she was guiding those fathers, she was also deciding who would go home with whom. The camera shows the shocked faces of the audience, capturing expressions of disbelief, horror, and morbid fascination. A woman in the third row puts her hand to her mouth, as if trying to suppress a scream. An older man shakes his head slowly, unable to comprehend. Alex Rodriguez turns directly to the camera, his piercing gaze piercing the lens to connect directly with viewers at home. Today, we'll hear the confession of a woman who admits to participating in a scheme that switched more than 20 babies during her career, 20 families who raised children who weren't biologically theirs, 20 people who grew up never knowing their true origins. Until now, before we continue with this impactful story, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming revelations from the Hidden Truths program. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what you think will happen in this case. Your opinion is very important for us to continue bringing you this exclusive content that transforms lives. The silence in the studio is oppressive when Jason finally looks up to meet the elderly woman sitting across from him. There's something devastating in the way his eyes, an unusual green, that we now know he inherited from his biological mother, search for answers in Margaret's wrinkled face. Her eyes are red from crying, and her voice trembles as she speaks, as if each word were a small blade cutting her throat. "My whole life I felt out of place, like I didn't belong in my own family." The camera shows an elderly couple in the audience, the parents who raised him, visibly shaken. Mrs. Miller sobs silently as her husband hugs her, his own face a mask of contained grief. They never treated me any differently from my siblings. My parents always loved me, always did everything for me, but there was something I couldn't explain, something that bothered me at the most unexpected moments. Jason leans forward, his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles are white. The camera zooms in on those hands that, as the audience can see, are quite similar to Sarah's, though with subtle differences. I never looked like anyone in my family. I was always the only redhead among brunettes. My blood type was different. My allergies, my preferences, even the way I walked, everything was different. My father and brothers are passionate about sports, while I always preferred books and music. For years, I thought I was adopted, but my parents always denied it. They showed me photos of my mother pregnant, of the day I was born in the hospital. He swallows hard, and the camera captures a tear running down his tanned face. When he speaks again, his voice is almost a whisper. And now I find out it was true. My mother really did give birth that day. Only the baby she brought home wasn't me. Alex shakes his head slowly, giving Jason the moment he needs to compose himself. Jason, you found this out through a DNA test you took out of curiosity, right? You never imagined you'd discover something like this. Never. Jason runs a hand through his red hair, a nervous gesture. It was a birthday present from my wife. One of those popular ancestry kits. I just wanted to know about my origins, maybe find distant cousins in Europe. Instead, I found my twin sister who went to another family. The camera cuts to Sarah, sitting next to him, clearly his sister with similar facial features, the same auburn hair and the same intense green eyes, although with evident differences that show they are fraternal, not identical, twins. And worst of all, Alex, is that we spend our entire lives in the same city. Springfield only has 70,000 inhabitants. We attended the same elementary school, although in different classes. We probably crossed paths hundreds of times without knowing we were siblings. Jason takes a deep breath, fighting back a new wave of emotion. When I saw the test results, there was a very close kinship match with someone named Sarah Thompson. The website indicated fraternal twin sister. I thought it was a system error. I called technical support, complained, demanded they correct it. They explained that the level of genetic matching was typical of siblings born in the same birth, and that the differences in genetic profile confirmed that we were fraternal twins, not identical twins. Sarah wipes away a tear, taking the floor for the first time. Her voice has a similar timbre to Jason's, though softer. I took the test 6 months before Jason, at my doctor's insistence. I have a history of heart problems, and he wanted to check for genetic predispositions. When I received the result indicating a sibling, I thought it was a mistake. I'm an only child. She glances quickly at her adoptive parents in the audience. Or at least, that's what I always believed. Sarah continues, her voice gaining firmness as she speaks. We miss birthdays, graduations, weddings, everything. I had cancer at 30 and needed a compatible bone marrow donor. We searched for months, without success. My brother could have been that perfect donor, but I didn't even know he existed. Instead, I went through painful experimental treatments that could have been avoided. Attention turns to Margaret, who keeps her eyes downcast, her hands still gripping her purse tightly. There's something calculated in her posture, not exactly remorse, but perhaps a resigned acceptance of the inevitable. Alex approaches her slowly, like a prosecutor approaching a witness who is about to break. Margaret, you heard what Jason and Sarah just said, the suffering, the confusion, the missed opportunities. These are just 2 of the more than 20 babies you admit to having been involved in the switch. Do you have anything to say to them? Margaret slowly raises her gaze. Despite her age, her blue eyes are still piercing, almost hypnotic in their intensity. There's a disturbing clarity in them, not the confusion that often accompanies old age, but a sharp lucidity that suggests every word she's about to say has been carefully considered. I knew this would come to light one day. With all the DNA testing these days, it was only a matter of time. To be honest, I'm surprised it took so long. Her voice is calm, almost clinical, as if she were discussing the weather and not the destruction of dozens of lives. There is no trembling in her words, no hesitation that indicates doubt or regret. She speaks like someone who has spent decades rehearsing this moment. But why? Alex asks, his tone now more incisive, the frustration evident in his posture. What makes a respected professional like you participate in a decision like this? Not once, not twice, but more than 20 times over the years? What was your objective? What did you gain from it? Margaret adjusts her glasses with a precise movement, looking directly at the camera, as if she wanted to connect not only with the people in the studio, but with every viewer at home. You need to understand what it was like back then. Springfield Memorial Hospital served families from all walks of life. On one side of the hall, we had the best obstetrician in the state attending to executives and their wives in luxurious private suites. On the other, the public ward, where frightened teenagers gave birth without family support, where women victims of domestic violence whispered their stories to overwhelmed social workers. She pauses deliberately, letting the images she evokes sink into everyone's minds. I saw babies being born in terrible circumstances, mothers addicted to crack and heroin, unable to stay sober even during labor, violent fathers who threatened the child even before it left the hospital, families without shelter, without food, without the minimum conditions to raise a child properly. She pauses again. And then there were those perfect families, educated, stable, with resources, beautiful houses in safe neighborhoods, healthy bank accounts, solid moral values. Parents who had tried for years to have children, who had spent fortunes on fertility treatments, who had so much love to give. I just rebalance things. A murmur of shock runs through the audience. Some people stand up, as if instinctively wanting to distance themselves from such arrogance. Alex stares in disbelief, his disbelief giving way to indignation. Rebalanced? Are you saying you judge which parents deserve which babies? That you place yourself above God, the law, and nature itself to decide the fate of defenseless human beings? I was doing what was best for those children, Margaret insists, her voice now firmer, as if explaining something obvious to a stubborn child. That baby born to a 16-year-old drug-addicted mother? I gave him to a couple of doctors who couldn't have children after 3 miscarriages. He grew up to become a neurosurgeon who saves lives every day. That girl born to abusive parents, whose father had already broken her older sister's arm. She went to a family with 3 other happy and well-adjusted children. Today she's a teacher, shaping the next generation. I saved those children. Alex points to Jason and Sarah. And these twins here? What was your justification for separating them? For depriving siblings of the fundamental right to know each other, to grow up together? What terrible sin did they commit to deserve your divine correction, Margaret? For the first time, Margaret seemed to hesitate. A shadow of something akin to uncertainty crossed her face, quickly suppressed by her mask of professional serenity. The Wilson Thompsons were facing serious financial problems after the twins were born. The father worked 2 jobs. The mother cleaned houses when she could. Their apartment had only 2 bedrooms, and they already had an older child. The Millers were older, financially stable, but couldn't have biological children due to fertility problems. They had a nursery ready for years, waiting for a child who never came. It seemed fair. Fair? Alex repeats, his voice rising an octave, his face beginning to flush. Who gave him the right to decide what is fair? Who gave him the right to play God? To decide that one child deserved rich parents and another should stay with parents struggling to survive? Have you ever stopped to think that maybe, just maybe, each of those babies was exactly where they should be? I wasn't playing God, Margaret replies, a slight tremor now evident in her voice, the first crack in her facade of moral certainty. I was correcting his mistakes, redistributing resources, giving each child the best possible chance. The audience reacts with a mixture of gasps and exclamations of indignation. A woman in the audience shouts monster, before being silenced by a producer. Alex shakes his head, his expression oscillating between disbelief and disgust. Margaret, you don't seem to understand the gravity of what you've done. You didn't save these children. You stole their true identities, their stories, their biological connections. He turns to the audience, opening his arms in a gesture that encompasses the entire studio. But there's more to this story that you don't yet know. The tension in the studio is palpable when Alex turns his attention back to Margaret. There's a different glint in his eyes now, the look of someone about to reveal their ace in the hole. You mentioned more than 20 babies in your confession, but so far we've only been able to identify 12 confirmed cases through DNA testing. Why is that? Margaret, why don't the numbers add up? What haven't you told us yet? The elderly woman shifts uncomfortably in her chair, avoiding Alex's direct gaze. For the first time since she began speaking, She seems genuinely uncomfortable, as if she has reached a point in the conversation she hadn't anticipated. Not all cases were documented in the same way. Some were more informal. Documented? Alex raises his eyebrows, the surprise on his face not entirely convincing to more attentive viewers. Of course, he already knew this part of the story before Margaret stepped onto the stage. What exactly do you mean by that? How do you document the theft of a baby's identity? Margaret takes a deep breath, as if gathering courage for a leap into the dark. I kept records of all of them. The studio falls into absolute silence, so complete you could hear the hum of the cameras. Jason and Sarah lean forward simultaneously, their expressions reflecting the same shock and morbid fascination. Alex leans forward, his gaze now fixed on the old woman like a predator who has finally cornered his prey. Are you telling me you have a list? A record of every baby you helped change? It's more than that, Margaret replies softly, her voice now fragile, almost childlike in its sudden vulnerability. It's a diary, with dates, names, motives, everything. Every decision, every exchange, every arrangement. She opens the bag she's been holding so tightly since entering the studio and takes out a brown leather-bound notebook, worn with time, the yellowed edges of the pages visible even from a distance. It's all here, all of them, not just the ones already discovered, but all the others. The camera zooms in on the diary as Margaret hands it to Alex with trembling hands. It's an apparently ordinary object, the kind of notebook anyone could buy at a stationery store. But the weight it carries is almost palpable, as if the altered lives had somehow given the object its own gravity. The presenter accepts it cautiously, as if he were receiving a bomb about to explode. He opens the diary and begins to leaf through the yellowed pages, filled with meticulous, orderly handwriting, almost artistic in its precision. His face visibly changes with each page turned, shifting from surprise to disbelief and finally to something bordering on horror. The camera captures the exact moment his eyes widen. As he reads something particularly shocking, "My God," he murmurs, before looking directly at Margaret. This wasn't just about rebalancing anything, was it? There are notes here about payments. Did you receive money for some of these exchanges? Margaret's face remains impassive, an almost perfect mask, but her hands, now empty without the diary to hold, begin to tremble visibly. When she speaks, her voice is low, but firm. Some families were desperate. You have no idea what it's like to see the suffering, day after day, of couples who would give anything to have a child. Couples who couldn't have children biologically, who had already tried adoption and been refused because of age, pre-existing health problems, even because of religion. They sought me out. They had heard rumors about my discretion. They offered compensation. Compensation? Alex repeats, his voice now sharp as a blade. Let's call it by its proper name. Margaret, this is child trafficking. You weren't redistributing babies like some Robin Hood of motherhood. You were selling them. A wave of shocked murmurs washes over the audience. The sound swells like a tide, mixing indignation, horror, and a morbid fascination. Jason and Sarah seem stunned by this new revelation, their expressions frozen in identical masks of newly discovered trauma. But I didn't do it alone, Margaret says suddenly, her voice taking on an unexpected urgency. There was a whole network. Doctors who forged birth certificates, administrative assistants who altered hospital records, even a judge who helped legalize certain situations when necessary. This revelation sends a new wave of shock through her. Alex frowns, examining the diary pages more closely. There are names here. Dr. Edward Simmons, Dr. Patricia Wong, Judge Carlton Mercer. Alex looks at the camera. We're talking about respected professionals in the Springfield community, all seemingly involved in this scheme. It all started with genuinely problematic cases, explains Margaret, her voice firmer now that the worst has been revealed. Babies who were in real danger, who needed to be removed from dangerous situations. Over time, it evolved. It became systematic. Some paid to have the children they always dreamed of. Others paid to solve problems, unwanted pregnancies, children of lovers, babies with disabilities that families didn't want to deal with. Alex slams the diary shut and stands, his face now a mask of determination. Stop recording. Now. The studio lights flicker as the cameramen exchange confused glances. The audience falls into absolute silence, uncertain of what is happening. Some spectators begin to whisper amongst themselves, trying to understand if this is part of the show or if something truly unexpected has occurred. Alex walks over to the producer at the side of the stage, a middle-aged man with headphones and a clipboard, and whispers something in his ear. The producer nods gravely and signals to the technical crew. Ladies and gentlemen, Alex addresses the audience, his voice now serious and controlled. Though a keen observer might notice the tension in his jaw, I'll have to ask you to leave the studio for a few moments. What we're dealing with here goes beyond a family or psychological issue. We're potentially facing confessions of serious crimes that need to be handled with due process. My team will escort you to the waiting room, where refreshments will be offered. Please follow the production assistants in an orderly fashion. The audience is silently evacuated, casting curious glances back as they leave the studio. Cameras are switched off and microphones removed, though a single camera continues recording discreetly. Only Alex, Margaret, Jason, Sarah, and two producers remain in the studio, along with a woman in a suit who has just entered from the back. She is tall, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and a military posture. Carrying a discreetly visible badge in her jacket pocket, Alex turns to the newcomer. Detective Ramirez, thank you for coming so quickly. This is the diary I mentioned on the phone. He hands the leather notebook to the woman, who accepts it with gloved hands, careful not to compromise any possible fingerprints or other evidence. What's going on? Jason asks, confused and scared, looking from the detective to Alex and back to Margaret. Why is the police here? I thought this was just for, I don't know, healing? Reconciliation? Alex sits down again, his face now grave. Jason, Sarah, before you arrived today, I received an anonymous phone call about Margaret. The informant mentioned the existence of this diary and the extent of the scheme. It wasn't just a nurse acting on her own. We're talking about a systematic organization operating for decades. He looks at the elderly woman, who now keeps her gaze downcast, her hands clasped in her lap with forced tranquility. What she initially said was that she had switched babies because she believed she was doing what was best for them. A morally questionable justification, but one that indicated at least an altruistic intention, even if profoundly misguided. But what we discover in this diary goes far beyond that. The detective flips through the notebook, her professional face remaining neutral, but her eyes revealing shock as she reads. There is information here on at least 27 babies, not just 20 as we initially suspected. And there are details of financial transactions, names of doctors, administrative staff, and even a judge, all apparently involved. We have here evidence of a child trafficking ring operating for almost 3 decades. She looks at Margaret. Mrs. Wilson, I need to inform you that you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney and to have an attorney present during questioning. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided. Do you understand these rights? That won't be necessary, Margaret interrupts, surprisingly calm given how things have turned out. I knew this would happen when I decided to come on the show. That's why I brought the diary. I'm tired of carrying this secret. 40 years is too long to live with it. Sarah, who had been silent until then, absorbing each new revelation like a physical blow, suddenly stands up. Her green eyes gleam with a fury that seems to light up her entire face. So all of this was just a business for you? Our lives were merely commodities? Something to be bought and sold like used cars? That wasn't the case, Margaret insists, finally looking at the twins. There's a plea in her eyes that contrasts with the steady calm she's maintained until now. In some cases, yes, there was money involved. But for most, including the two of you, it was truly because I believed I was doing what was best. I saw the conditions you were born into. I knew your families. I just wanted. Stop, Jason interrupts, his voice trembling with restrained emotion. Stop pretending it was for us. You didn't even know us. We were just babies. We had no personalities, no history. You had no way of knowing who we would become, what kind of life we would have. Alex flips through some pages of the diary the detective returned to him, his eyes narrowing as he finds a particular passage. So, how do you explain this? On the page about Jason and Sarah, there's a note about a special deal with the Wilson Thompsons and a sum of $5,000. A fortune in 1982. The revelation hits the silent studio like a bombshell. Sarah stands up, staggering slightly, as if she'd been hit. Her face goes pale, and she has to lean on her chair to keep from falling. My biological parents. Did my biological parents pay to get rid of one of us? Did they know? All this time, did they know? No. Margaret replies quickly, genuine panic now visible in her eyes. For the first time, she seems truly concerned about the impact of her revelations. No, Sarah, your biological mother never knew. She thought you were an only child. I altered the records, made it seem like Jason had died during childbirth due to complications. She never suspected. The money came from another source. Which source? Alex asks sharply, though his tone suggests he already knows the answer. Margaret looks at Sarah, then at Jason, and finally lowers her head, as if the weight of 4 decades of secrets had finally become too heavy to bear. Your biological father, Robert Wilson. Jason gasps, putting his hands to his mouth. His whole body seems to shrink from the shock of the revelation. The biological father paid to separate the twins? Margaret shakes her head slowly. Your biological father was an ambitious man. He wasn't a monster, but he was starting out in local politics. He had big dreams for the future. When he found out his wife was expecting twins, he was terrified, not out of love or responsibility, but because of the practical implications. They could barely afford to raise one child, let alone 2. The babies meant double the expenses, a bigger apartment, maybe his wife having to leave her job longer. She pauses, looking directly at Sarah. He contacted me after hearing rumors about my arrangements. He offered the money if I could guarantee that one of the babies would go to a good family. He was very specific. He wanted guarantees that the child would have opportunities he couldn't offer. Detective Ramirez closes the diary, carefully placing it in an evidence bag. Ms. Wilson, I need to take you to the station for a formal statement. We have much to discuss regarding the contents of this notebook and the potential legal implications. Margaret nods resignedly and rises slowly, leaning on her cane. There is no resistance in her movements, only the acceptance of someone who has finally reached the end of a long journey. Before following the detective, she turns to the twins, an unexpected vulnerability now visible in her wrinkled face. Jason, Sarah, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm not here to ask for it, but I want you to know that of all the children whose lives I've altered, you were the only ones I truly followed through the years. I watched you from afar, at school graduations, at baseball games where you were the star pitcher, Jason, at the dance recital where you performed a solo, Sarah, even at Sarah's wedding, I was there, at the back of the church. I wanted to make sure you were both okay, that my decision had been the right one, and that should comfort us. Jason asks, his voice trembling with suppressed anger. That you spied on us like some kind of sick experiment? That you watched our lives unfold separately when we should have been living them together? No. Margaret replies softly, her mask of moral certainty completely abandoned now. No. Nothing I say can fix what I've done, but maybe this can help a little. She pulls a yellowed envelope from her bag and hands it to Sarah. These are all the photos I've taken of you two over the years, side by side, even without you knowing, in the same third-grade school play, playing different characters, at the same Christmas shopping mall in 1990, waiting in line for Santa Claus with only 3 children between you, at the same high school award ceremony when you both received scholarships. You were never really apart. Fate insisted on putting you on the same path, repeatedly, as if trying to correct my mistake. Sarah accepts the envelope with trembling hands, while the detective leads Margaret out of the studio. The silence that follows is profound, broken only by the sound of pages being turned as Sarah and Jason look at the photographs. Decades of moments shared without them knowing. Parallel lives that should have been a single journey. 6 months later, the image shows a crowded courtroom. In the dock, a visibly frail Margaret Wilson, now 76 years old, awaits sentencing. Beside her are 6 other defendants, 2 doctors, an administrative assistant, a retired judge, and the intermediaries who help find families willing to pay. The reporter speaks softly to the camera. After one of the most shocking child trafficking cases in recent history, Margaret Wilson and her accomplices await sentencing. The trial, which lasted for months, revealed a sophisticated network that operated for nearly 3 decades at Springfield Memorial Hospital, resulting in the illegal exchange and sale of at least 27 confirmed babies. With suspicions that the actual number may exceed 50, the camera shows Jason and Sarah sitting, side by side in the gallery, surrounded by other victims and their families. Unlike the first time we saw them, they now seem united, as if months of shared pain and discovery had forged a bond that no separation could completely break. The judge bangs the gavel, drawing the court's attention. Margaret Wilson, After considering the seriousness of the crimes, the extent of the damage caused, and the defendant's cooperation with the authorities, this court sentences the woman to 15 years in prison. He pauses, looking directly at the elderly woman. However, given her state of health and advanced age, the sentence will be served under house arrest with electronic monitoring. The woman will remain available to the authorities to continue assisting in the identification and notification of victims not yet located. The sentences for the other defendants range from 5 to 20 years, with the doctors and the retired judge receiving the harshest penalties for abusing their positions of trust. After the court hearing, the camera follows Jason and Sarah as they walk out of the building together. "How do you feel about the sentence?" the reporter asks. Sarah takes a deep breath before answering. "No sentence can bring back what we've lost. This isn't about revenge, but about justice and truth. Now all the victims can finally know who they really are." Jason adds, "Most importantly, this case has opened society's eyes to something no one imagined possible. Medical records are being reviewed, and stricter protocols are being implemented in hospitals. If this prevents something similar from happening again, it's already a victory." "And what about the two of you? How has this reconnection process been?" A small smile appears on Sarah's face. "We're learning to be siblings at 43. It's strange, painful at times, but also wonderful. We've discovered we have the same taste in music, the same peanut allergy, even the same way of laughing. And our families are coming together too," Jason adds. "My adoptive parents and Sarah's adoptive parents have become friends. Our children are meeting new cousins. It's like we're creating a new extended family from the broken pieces." "And your biological parents?" the reporter asks cautiously. Jason's face closes up slightly. "Our biological mother passed away 10 years ago, never knowing she had twins. As for our biological father," he looks at Sarah, who adds, "Robert Wilson is facing his own accusations for his role in the scheme. It's complicated. Part of me wants to hate him for what he did, for choosing to get rid of Jason. Another part understands that he was young, scared, in difficult circumstances. Maybe one day we can talk to him, understand him better. For now, we're focused on our healing." The scene cuts to a sunny park 3 months later. Jason and Sarah are hosting a large family picnic. Children run and play, their own children and nephews who never knew they were cousins. The adoptive parents of both groups chat animatedly with other family members, sharing stories and old photos. 22 of the 27 affected families identified so far participated in this first annual gathering, the narration explains. An event of healing, reconnection, and reconstruction. For many, there are still unanswered questions, complicated relationships to navigate, and identities to reprocess. But today, at least, there's truth. The camera focuses on Jason and Sarah, sitting on a bench under a leafy tree, watching their blended families interact. "You know, what's strangest?" Sarah says, looking at the children playing. "Sometimes I wonder if we're better people because of what happened to us. I had wonderful adoptive parents. I had opportunities I might not have had otherwise." "I think about that too," Jason admits. "But then I remember it wasn't up to her to decide that for us. We had the right to grow up together, to know our origins, and now we have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time," Sarah concludes, taking her brother's hand. The camera slowly pulls back, capturing the park full of families gathered together, some laughing, some crying, all processing the strange journey that brought them there. The final narration echoes, "Sometimes, the most painful stories lead to the most beautiful new beginnings." The truth, however difficult it may be to face, is always the first step towards healing. The screen gradually fades to black, and the words appear. To date, 24 of the 27 families affected by the actions of Margaret Wilson and her network have been identified and notified. The investigation continues to locate all those involved and any potential additional victims. Margaret Wilson remains under house arrest, serving her sentence while continuing to cooperate with authorities. If you suspect you may have been affected by similar cases or know someone who may have been, please contact the Victim Support Center at the number below. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to follow more amazing stories like this one. Leave your comments about what you thought of the conclusion of this case.